Tricks. The hidden archetype that controls her attraction. Carl Jung discovered something most men never even consider, that every woman carries within her an unconscious image of the ideal man, a psychological construct he called the animus. Unlike conscious preferences like tall, funny, or successful, the animus is deeper, emotional, mythic. It's the invisible filter through which she experiences male energy. And when a man accidentally or deliberately mirrors this internal image, something extraordinary happens. She projects her fantasy onto him. He becomes in her mind not just a man, but the man. Suddenly, she's not just attracted, she's obsessed. The kind of obsession that overrides logic, disrupts her routine, and makes her feel like fate is pulling the strings. What's more haunting is that this projection doesn't require perfection. In fact, it thrives on mystery, contradiction, and hidden depth. A man who reveals everything too quickly doesn't allow the animus to activate. There's no room for her imagination to run wild. But a man who reveals himself slowly, who speaks little yet with weight, who seems to carry unseen worlds behind his eyes, that's the man her psyche has been waiting for. She doesn't want the full story handed to her. She wants to discover it piece by piece. That's what Jung meant when he said, each revelation must feel like her own conquest, not your confession. Men who understand this principle stop trying to impress with flashy details. Instead, they build an inner world so rich and layered that a woman naturally leans in. She senses depth. She wants to know more. This creates a magnetic pull that words cannot manufacture. It's not manipulation, it's alignment with the hidden mechanics of female psychology. Most men play on the surface, unaware that real attraction is formed far beneath it. When you embody presence, silence, emotional control, and subtle self-revelation, you don't just get her attention. You activate a psychological phenomenon that even she can't explain. You become the mirror of something ancient, subconscious, and powerful. And once that projection begins, it's nearly impossible for her to let go. Because you're not just a man anymore. You're her symbol. You're her story. You're her animus. Tricks 2. The more you need her, the less she wants you. There's a painful irony in modern dating that most men never see until it's too late. The moment you begin orbiting a woman, canceling your plans for her, checking if she saw your message, agreeing with everything she says, just to stay in her good graces, is the moment she starts losing interest. Why? Because neediness is invisible to the man who feels it, but unmistakable to the woman on the receiving end. And as the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer observed over 200 years ago, the more you need her to feel complete, the more she will pull away. This isn't about being cold, it's about understanding value. When a man communicates consciously or not that a woman is the center of his world, he places himself beneath her. He becomes the one seeking approval, chasing attention, waiting for affection, like a reward. But deep inside, every woman is a primal instinct that rejects dependence. She doesn't want to feel your emotional survival hinges on her affection. She wants to enter a world already in motion, not rescue a man stuck in emotional limbo. The tragedy is that men often do this out of sincerity. They care, they try, they give, and still they lose her. That's because effort without self-worth looks like desperation. A man with a mission, a life that excites him, passions that don't include her name on every page, that man becomes magnetic. Not because he plays games, but because he doesn't play at all. He simply lives. When you stop needing her validation to feel whole, something changes. You become unpredictable, self-contained, and subtly intimidating. She begins to wonder, why doesn't he chase me like the others? That mystery draws her in. You're no longer the man begging to be chosen, you're the man she has to earn. And that's the paradox. The less you make her the source of your happiness, the more she wants to be part of your world, not to complete it, but to be chosen by it. Because in a world full of men trying to prove themselves, the one who doesn't need her is the one she can't ignore. Tricks 3. Why women want men other women already want. It's one of the most disturbing truths buried in human behavior, and yet it explains so much about modern dating. Charles Darwin, while studying sexual selection in the animal kingdom, uncovered a ruthless pattern. Female animals often chose mates not based on strength, beauty, or status, but because other females had already chosen them. The implication was unsettling. Desire wasn't just about attraction, it was about validation through competition. And what Darwin observed in peacocks and primates holds just as true for people. Women don't just want a man, they want a man that other women already want. It's not always conscious, it's wired. When a woman senses that a man is desired by her peers, when she hears whispers of another woman's interest, notices a glance, or picks up on casual mentions of a female friend, something inside her stirs. A biological reflex activates. Why is he valuable? What am I not seeing yet? It's not about copying others, it's about subconscious vetting. If other women find you desirable, her brain interprets that as proof of your value. And in a world where women are constantly trying to filter out weak, boring, or clingy men, this becomes a shortcut. It signals you're already pre-approved. That's why some average men suddenly become magnetic in group settings. Not because they changed, but because they're being evaluated through the lens of female competition. This is why you'll see women chase men they once ignored the moment another woman shows interest. Not because they've suddenly changed their minds, but because the value has been externally validated. But here's the key. Social proof must be subtle. Overdo it, brag, name drop, or try to make her jealous, and you look insecure, manipulative. But understate it. Mention a conversation with a woman at work, say a friend of mine told me this, or casually reference another woman's opinion and her mind starts connecting dots. You must appear like a man who naturally attracts women, without ever trying. Because when women see that others already want you, they stop wondering if they should and start worrying they're already too late. Tricks 4. The less time you give, the more she craves. In the world of power and persuasion, Niccolò Machiavelli understood something that modern men constantly forget. What is abundant is taken for granted. But what is scarce becomes irresistible. He didn't just apply this principle to politics, he used it in love. When courting the daughter of a wealthy Florentine banker, Machiavelli did something profoundly counterintuitive. He didn't flood her with attention. He didn't try to win her over with constant presence. Instead, he met her just twice a week for exactly 2 hours, never more, never less. And what happened next was astonishing. She began to rearrange her life just to fit into his limited schedule. Every moment with him became sacred. Every minute he wasn't there became an aching void. Her mind didn't process his absence as rejection, but as high value. Why? Because he trained her psychology to associate his presence with exclusivity. Modern men do the opposite. They make themselves endlessly available. They text back immediately, cancel plans just to see her, and think that giving more time equals giving more love. But in reality, they're suffocating the attraction. What begins as excitement quickly dissolves into routine. And routine is where desire dies. Time scarcity works because it triggers the fear of loss. When a woman doesn't know when she'll see you next, every interaction becomes more intense. When she knows you're always there, she stops being present because your presence no longer feels meaningful. Scarcity creates weight. Availability breeds forgettability. This doesn't mean you ignore her. It means you curate your availability like a rare experience. You appear intentionally, leave while things are still exciting, and never linger past the emotional high. Machiavelli himself wrote, "It is not enough to be loved. One must be remembered." You don't get remembered by being predictable. You get remembered by being unforgettable in limited doses. So stop trying to prove your worth through time. Start creating space for tension to grow. Because the paradox of human attraction is this: the less you offer your time, the more she'll organize her world just to earn it. Tricks 5. When you say nothing, she hears everything. In a world where everyone is screaming for attention, the one who stays silent becomes the loudest in the room. Friedrich Nietzsche, known for piercing the veil of human behavior, understood a truth that most men overlook. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And when used correctly, it becomes one of the most potent forces of attraction a man can wield. not because it impresses, but because it creates mystery. It triggers psychological tension. It forces her to lean in. Most men are terrified of silence around women. They overtalk. They over-explain. They fill every second with chatter as if silence is the enemy. But the man who embraces silence, who can sit calmly, confidently, without rushing to fill space, creates psychological space for curiosity to grow. He becomes harder to read, and because the human mind despises unresolved gaps, she starts to wonder, what's on his mind? Why isn't he trying to impress me? This dynamic played out in Nietzsche's own life. When he met Lou Andrea Salome, a woman pursued by countless intellectual men, Nietzsche didn't flood her with praise. He didn't sell himself. He chose instead to remain composed, mysterious, and reserved. And while other men lost themselves trying to be unforgettable, Nietzsche became unforgettable by not trying at all. His restraint stood out in a sea of desperation. That's the power of strategic silence. It signals that you don't seek her approval. And that paradoxically is what makes her seek yours. When you hold back, you give her space to chase. When you speak less, your words gain weight. She starts asking the questions. She starts opening up. You flip the dynamic without a single performance. You don't need to share your entire life story to be seen. You need to let her uncover you piece by piece. Mystery is not about being evasive, it's about giving her something to earn. And silence is the doorway to that tension. Most men fear being forgotten, but the truth is brutal. You're only remembered when you give her something her mind can't solve. And the unsolved man is the man who lingers in her mind long after the others disappear, because silence isn't absence, it's presence multiplied. Tricks 6. Stop seeking her approval. There's a mistake that almost every man makes when he starts to fall for a woman. He begins to shape himself around her expectations. He agrees with her ideas, avoids disagreement, tries to appear perfect, polite, and agreeable. But what he doesn't realize is that every time he sacrifices his truth for harmony, he loses a piece of his masculine edge. And nothing kills desire faster than a man who's too eager to be liked. This is where one of the most misunderstood characters in fiction reveals a brutal truth: the Joker and Harley Quinn. Harley wasn't just any woman, she was a psychiatrist, a doctor of the mind, logical, composed, emotionally intelligent. But when she met the Joker, she fell into obsession. Why? Not because he flattered her, not because he was kind, but because he challenged her worldview. He exposed the cracks in her beliefs. He made her feel something real, unfiltered, unapproved, dangerous. Nietzsche understood this. He wrote that men must have enemies not just to fight, but to know who they truly are. And in the realm of attraction, that means being willing to disagree, to hold your ground, to say no, even when it's easier to say yes. Because when you challenge a woman not by disrespecting her, but by confronting her ideas, you force her to become real with you. You push her out of the performance and into authentic connection. Most men are so afraid of conflict that they fold at the first sign of disapproval. They nod, laugh, and surrender their convictions to avoid tension. But here's the paradox: that tension is where attraction lives. Not in argument, but in challenge. Not in comfort, but in contrast. A woman can only be drawn into a man's world if that world is stable, real, and untouchable by her approval or rejection. You don't attract her by being perfect. You attract her by being unapologetically you. Not to rebel, but to remain grounded. To show her that her affection is welcomed, but not required for you to stand tall. Because when a man stops needing to be liked, he becomes someone she can't help but feel. And in the realm of attraction, feeling always beats approval. Tricks 7. Make her think, not just feel. Most men try to win a woman's heart by aiming straight for her emotions, compliments, gifts, affection, attention. But the most powerful connections aren't born in the heart, they begin in the mind. If you want her to feel deeply, to remember you long after you're gone, you have to do something rare and unforgettable. Make her think. Not about surface topics, but about herself, her beliefs, her values, her contradictions. This was the secret weapon of Socrates, the philosopher who shook the foundations of ancient Athens, not with power or wealth, but with questions. His gift wasn't persuasion. it was psychological disarmament. When Socrates met Aspasia of Miletus, one of the most brilliant women of her time, he didn't flatter her. He questioned her. When she spoke of love, he asked, "Do you love the man or the status he carries?" When she spoke of truth, he asked, whose truth his method wasn't. Attack it was quiet, relentless inquiry. And it worked. She became intellectually unsettled, but that disturbance drew her in. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was making her see herself more clearly. Most men avoid this approach. Why? Because they fear being seen as difficult. They think agreeing is safer. But a woman doesn't crave a mirror. She craves a contrast, someone who respectfully challenges her not to win an argument, but to ignite a deeper awareness. That's the seed of passion that grows beyond mere attraction. It becomes mental intimacy. When you respectfully challenge her views, ask questions no one else dares to ask, you become the man she can't ignore. Why? Because she doesn't just feel good around you. She feels awakened. You represent something rare, a space where she's not being entertained but expanded. You don't need to outtalk her. You don't need to dominate. You just need to listen, question, and respond with grounded truth. It shows strength. It shows curiosity. And most of all, it shows that you see her not as a prize, but as a person worthy of real engagement. Because real passion doesn't start with physical tension. It starts with a simple, disarming question. But have you ever questioned the tricks 8? Stop competing for her attention. There's a reason some men walk into a room and immediately shift the energy without saying a word. It's not their looks. It's not their money. It's the way they carry themselves, like they're not here to compete. They're here to be chosen. This is the quiet power of becoming the prize. And few understood this better than the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. At a lavish gathering in 19th century Berlin, Schopenhauer arrived late holding a book, uninterested in the beautiful women vying for male attention. He didn't perform. He didn't flatter. When a noblewoman approached and asked if he knew who she was, he replied, "Yes. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm in the middle of something important." He then went back to reading. The result, she spent the rest of the evening chasing his interest, initiating conversation, trying to earn his attention. This is the art of reversal. Women are used to being pursued. They expect admiration, flattery, effort. But when you disrupt that dynamic, when you show that your attention is selective and that you are not another man begging for her time, you flip the script. Suddenly, she's the one questioning her value. She's the one trying to prove she's worthy of you. And here's what makes this even more powerful. It's not about arrogance. It's about alignment with your own worth. You're not trying to impress. You're simply too focused on your purpose, your standards, and your vision to drop everything for someone just because she's attractive. That mindset creates scarcity, and scarcity creates value. Most men lose women because they treat themselves like a product on sale, available, affordable, and desperate for attention. But the men who get remembered are those who treat their attention like currency. They don't give it freely. They make others earn it. When you shift your energy from, "I hope she likes me," to, "Let's see if she's even qualified for my world," everything changes. You stop being a pursuer. You become the gravitational center. Because the moment she senses that you're not trying to win her is the moment she starts wondering how to win you. Tricks 9. You don't need to chase women when you become a complete man. There's a kind of man who doesn't chase women, yet women chase him. He doesn't perform, impress, or compete, and yet his presence lingers in their minds long after he's gone. What makes him different? Carl Jung had an answer. He called it individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole, not by adding layers to your identity, but by stripping away everything that isn't truly you. At 38, Jung had every marker of success: a thriving career, a respected name, a stable life. But he felt hollow. So he stepped away from everything: society, work status, and faced the one question that terrifies most men: who am I without all of this? What followed was not a retreat. It was a descent into his own psyche. Dreams, visions, fears, ancestral pain. He confronted the chaos most men spend their lives avoiding. And when he emerged years later, he was no longer the same man. He didn't just understand himself, he had become himself. That's what women sensed in him. It wasn't charm, it wasn't tactics. It was presence, the kind of deep, unmoving inner stability that speaks louder than words. Jung didn't need validation because he had already given it to himself. He didn't need love to feel whole because he had met every part of himself in solitude. This is what most men today miss. They chase women hoping to feel complete. They think a relationship will fill the emptiness, but a man who hasn't made peace with his own shadows will always bleed insecurity into every connection. Women may flirt with that man, but they won't attach to him. The man who completes his own inner work, who walks through his fears, integrates his contradictions, and emerges authentic. He doesn't attract women through effort. He draws them through energy. His groundedness is rare. His calm is unsettling. He doesn't demand loyalty but inspires it, not because he needs her but because he chooses her. That's the paradox. The man who becomes whole alone is the one women want to stand beside, not to fix him, not to fill him, but because in his presence, they feel safer, deeper, and more real themselves. Because a man who's complete within is the only man she'll feel truly complete beside. Tricks 10. Sometimes saying no is the most powerful yes you'll ever give. Most men believe that accepting everything a woman offers is polite, respectful, even romantic. A free drink. Sure. A favor gratefully taken. A dinner invitation. Absolutely. But Niccolò Machiavelli, the ruthless strategist of human behavior, knew better. In his private journals, he recorded a principle that defied the common script. To be respected in relationships, you must not be too easily pleased. Because the truth is brutal, the more easily you accept, the less value you project. When Machiavelli was being courted by a wealthy Florentine countess, she offered to pay for an extravagant trip to impress him. Most men would have said yes. Machiavelli didn't. His reply was simple. I pay for my own travels. She was stunned, not insulted, but intrigued. Why would a man turn down her generosity? The answer is timeless. He had value that didn't need to be bought. This kind of selective rejection flips a psychological switch in a woman's mind. Instead of seeing a man who's grateful for crumbs, she sees a man who knows his worth and protects it. And suddenly she wants to earn a place in his world, not because he asked her to, but because he didn't need her to. Most men are so desperate to please, they forget that approval too freely given loses all meaning. When you accept everything, she stops valuing what she offers. But when you decline politely with confidence, you create scarcity, and scarcity breeds fascination. But be warned, this isn't about playing hard to get. It's about having real standards. If you accept everything out of fear of losing her, you've already lost power. But if you choose what aligns with your self-respect, your energy becomes rare. And what's rare becomes desirable. Machiavelli knew that in love, like in politics, power flows toward those who don't beg to be liked. You don't win her heart by always saying yes. You win her curiosity, her respect, and eventually her devotion by showing that not everything is for sale, especially not your self-worth. Because the man who rejects what others would accept is the man she starts to see as irreplaceable. The message I would like to convey to you: stop proving. Start becoming. The psychology of true male power, in a world that constantly tells men to do more to be worthy. Text more, give more, chase harder. One truth often goes unspoken. The men who are most desired are not the ones who try the hardest, but the ones who know themselves the deepest. Across history, philosophy, and psychology, from Machiavelli to Jung, one timeless lesson emerges. You are most powerful when you don't need approval to be who you are. You don't need to chase validation from others when your identity is rooted in something internal. That's what Carl Jung meant by individuation, not perfection, but integration. Facing your insecurities, accepting your flaws. Building a life that doesn't depend on being accepted, but on being real. When you embody that kind of self-awareness, you stop needing women or anyone else to complete you. And ironically, that's when people start being drawn to you. Likewise, power doesn't come from availability, it comes from scarcity. It comes from knowing your time is valuable and treating it as such. It comes from not being afraid to say no when something disrespects your standards. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to reveal everything to be understood. Silence, presence, and purpose speak louder than charm ever could. The lesson is, this become the kind of man who doesn't need to be chosen because he's already chosen himself. From that place of inner strength, everything changes. People respect you more. Women respond differently. You start to attract not because of effort, but because of essence. Because in the end, the world doesn't reward the man who begs to be seen. It rewards the one who doesn't flinch in his own light.